Okay, we're going to make a start now. So welcome everyone to our GCSE Maths session. In today's lesson, we are going to be looking at the equation of a line. So we're going to be looking at straight line graphs. We're going to be looking at y equals mx plus c. And at the same time, we're going to be going through a lot of exam questions. So for those of you who don't have access to the Q&A, if you just scan this QR code, which is on the screen, you can also type in your answers into the form and I would be able to see them. And if you also have any questions, you can keep typing them into the form and I will be able to answer them for you as well. So if we go through the starter question first, so the last lesson we looked at the gradient and the midpoint of a line. So this was a starter question based on what we've done in our last lesson. So it says find the gradient of the line that passes through -3, 4, 5, and 8. Okay, so if we have a look at answering this, so we've got two coordinates, we've got -3, 4, and then we've got 5, 8. Two sets of coordinates there. We're going to label one of them as 1 and 2. Okay, so we'll label this one as 1 and we'll label this one as 2. We'll label this one as x, y, x, y. Okay, because we know that the first coordinate is x and then the next coordinate is y. And all we're going to do is the second coordinate subtract the first coordinate. Remember, to work out the gradient means the steepness of the line. Okay, it means the steepness of the line. So all we're going to do is the change in y divided by the change in x. Okay, so this is the first coordinate, so we're just going to label it x1 and y1. The second coordinate we're going to label as x2 and y2. We're going to do the second coordinate, subtract the first coordinate. So we're going to do 8 subtract 4 divided by 5 subtract -3. Okay, so 8 subtract 4 gives you 4, and then 5 subtract -3 gives you 8, because two negatives make a positive. So 5 add 3 gives you 8. So your answer is 4/8. You can simplify that to a half. So your final answer is a half. So the gradient of this line, the steepness of this line is a half. Okay, so your gradient is just a half. Now, what we're going to do today is there was a few questions we never got on to in our last lesson, and we're going to focus on them first, two questions, and then we're going to move on to y equals mx plus c. So it says over here, I'll have a go at this question first, and then I'm going to give you guys this question to have a go at. So it says the line L is drawn on the grid below. Okay, so let's find the gradient of the line L. So when you're given a line on a graph, all you have to do is you have to pick out two coordinates that you can see. Okay, so you pick out two coordinates which are present on the line. Okay, so that's what you're going to do. You're going to pick out two coordinates that are present on the line that you can easily see. So for example, on this line, I can see that there is a coordinate over here. This is one of the coordinates. You can see that's -3, 4. And another coordinate that I can see is this one over here. Okay, that's 0, 1. Okay, so I'm just going to write down my coordinates. My coordinates that I have picked out are -3, 4 and 0, 1. Those are the two coordinates that I have picked out. Now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to work out the gradient of those 2 points. Okay, so again, same thing. This is x, this is y, this is x, this is y. I'm going to label this as 1. I'm going to label this as 2. And all I'm going to do is 2 subtract 1. Okay, so it's the change in y, remember? It's the change in y divided by the change in x. So the change in y is just going to be, because we're doing 2 subtract 1, it's going to be 1 subtract 4, like that, divided by the change in x. We're doing 2 subtract 1, so it's going to be 0 subtract -3. Okay, so 1 subtract 4 will get you -3, and then 0 subtract -3. Two negatives will make a positive, so 0 add 3 is just 3. Okay, and then -3 divided by 3 will just get you -1. So the gradient of this line is -1. Okay, so with a question like this, all you're going to do is you are going to pick out 2 coordinates on the line that you can distinctly see. Don't pick out coordinate like, well, all the coordinates are good, but don't pick out coordinate like this, for example, in the middle of a square or something that you can't say for exact. Okay, so don't pick out coordinate like that. Pick out distinct coordinates that you can easily see and tell what the coordinates are. Once you've picked out the 2 coordinates, you're just going to write them down, the 2 coordinates, and then you're going to work out the gradient of the 2 coordinates. Okay, so here's a question for you guys to have a go at. So pick out 2 distinct coordinates from this line. I'm going to zoom in a bit. Actually, okay. For those of you who don't have access to the Q&A, you can scan the QR code and let me know your answer through the form. But I want you to work out the gradient of this line. Okay, guys, I'm just going to give you guys 30 more seconds, and then I'm going to go through the answers. Okay, I'm going to go through the answers now. So we need to work out the gradient of this line. Because we need to work out the gradient, step one is going to be pick out two coordinates. Okay, so we're going to pick out two coordinates which are on the line. Okay, so over here, where I can see that this is definitely 1, 1. So I'm going to pick out that coordinate. And I can see that this is definitely 3, 2. So I'm going to pick out that coordinate. So the two coordinates that I have picked out is 1, 1 and 3, 2. These are the two coordinates that I have picked out. I'm going to label them one as 1 and the other one as 2. Okay, and I'm going to label the x and y. So the first one is x, second one is y, first one is x, second one is y. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to do the change in y divided by the change in x. So the change in y, all we're going to do is we're going to do 2 subtract 1. Okay, so the change in y is going to be the y coordinate of the second one, subtract the y coordinate of the first one. So we're going to do 2 subtract 1. And then we're going to divide it by the change in x. So we're going to do 2 subtract 1 again. So the x coordinate of the second one is 3, and the x coordinate of the first one is 1. So it's going to be 3 subtract 1. So 2 subtract 1 is 1, 3 subtract 1 is 2, so it's going to be 1 over 2. Okay, that's your gradient of the line. So the gradient of line L is just a half. Okay, so that was just everything we've done in our last lesson. We never got into these last two questions. That's why we did them in today's lesson. We're now going to move on to the equation of the line, which is basically what we're going to be looking at through today's lesson. Okay, now the equation of a line is basically a way to denote a line. So over here we have a straight line on a graph. How can we know that that line is like that basically? What are the properties of that line? How do you know it's a line like that, not like that, for example, or like that? How do we know that it's a line which is going from left to right and going by that steepness? That's why we have an equation of line, so we can basically draw this line out on a different graph. We know how to draw the line out. It's a property of the graph. And basically, the equation of a line is always written in this format, y equals mx plus c. And we're going to go through what each letter over here means. Okay, so m stands for the gradient. So first of all, make sure that you note this down. This is the equation of a line. So this is the equation of a straight line, and it's really important. Okay, because a lot of questions are going to be based on this. So the equation of a straight line is y equals mx plus c. Now m stands for the gradient. Okay, now we know how to work out gradient. Gradient is just literally what we've been doing all of last lesson and what we've looked at in at the start of today's lesson. Gradient is just the steepness of the line. Okay, so it's just the steepness of the line. Is it shallow or is it very steep? It's the steepness of the line. If you have a negative gradient, that means it's going downwards. If you have a positive gradient, that means the line is going upwards. Okay. And we know that gradient, to calculate gradient, we just do the change in y divided by the change in x. So we're going to have two coordinates, and we're going to use both of those coordinates to work out what the steepness of the line is. So we need two coordinates in order to work out the gradient. Now, so we've dealt with the m. Okay, now the y and the x, there's not much to talk about. The y and the x are just coordinates. Okay, so the y and the x are just coordinates. So if you had the coordinates 1 and 2, you can substitute them in place of y and x. Okay, because we know that the second letter is y and the first letter is x. But normally they don't change. Normally in an equation of a line, if I show you some examples, an equation might be like this. Y equals 2x plus 1. As you can see, the y doesn't change. The x doesn't change. Okay, it's always like that. The y and the x are literally like that. It doesn't change. It stays there. Okay, now what does this c actually mean? Okay, now this c means the y-intercept. Okay, so if something intercepts something, that means that it basically crosses over that. So basically, if you have a look at this line over here, actually let's look at this line. The y-intercept is basically the point at which the line crosses the y-axis. So we know that the y-axis is the vertical line, and we know that the x-axis is the horizontal line. The y-intercept is the point at which the line crosses the y-axis. So in this case, we can see that this vertical line is the y-axis, and we can see that the line crosses the y-axis at this point. Okay, it crosses the y-axis at this point. So the y-intercept would be 1 because it crosses the y-axis at 1. In this case over here, we can see that this line crosses the y-axis at this point over here. And we can see that's between 0 and 1. So that means that it's around a half. So the y-intercept would be a half because it crosses the y-axis at a half. If I drew another example, if I drew an example like this, for example, okay, we've got this red line. We can see that this line crosses the y-axis over here. It crosses the y-axis at -3. So that means the y-intercept is -3. Because the y-intercept, all that means is that that's the place where the line crosses the y-axis. Okay, so that's what the C stands for. The C stands for the y-intercept. It is the number that crosses the y-axis. It is the place that crosses where the line crosses the y-axis. Okay, and that's what the C is. So if I showed you an example, so those are the sort of things that you need to know about the equation of a line. So you've got y equals mx plus c. It always has to be in that format. The equation of a line needs to be in that format. So if we had to look at this example, we have y equals 2x plus 1. So we can tell that we know that the equation of a line is y equals mx plus c. We know that's the equation of a line. We know that the 2 is in place of m, and we know that the m stands for the gradient. So that means the 2 must be the gradient. The gradient of this line is 2. The thing which is next to the x is going to be the gradient. And the number which is by itself tells you the y-intercept. So in this case, the gradient is 2, the steepness of the line is 2, and it crosses the y-axis at 1. Okay, that's the y-intercept. That's the place that it crosses the y-axis. It crosses the y-axis as at 1. If I showed you another example, let's say we did y equals -2x plus 3, we can see that the gradient of this line is the thing which is next to the x, this is the gradient of the line. This is the steepness of the line. So that means because it's negative, it's going downwards. So the gradient is -2 because that's the number which is next to the x. And the y-intercept is +3. Okay, so this is the y-intercept. So that means the line crosses the y-axis at +3. Okay, and just remember that the equation must be in this format. Y equals mx plus c. If you have something like y minus 2x equals 2, that's not in the correct format. That's not in the format of y equals mx plus c. We want the y by itself on one side. So we need to get rid of this 2x. We need to move this 2x to the other side. So what we're going to do is we're just going to add 2x to both sides, and that will get rid of the 2x from that side. So we're left with just y on that side, and we're left with 2x plus 2 on the other side. Okay, once we've got it into the correct format, then we can deal with anything we want to do with them. Okay, so that's just a bit of an overview about the equation of a line. It's in the format y equals mx plus c. M stands for the gradient and C stands for the y-intercept. So C is the place where the line crosses the y-axis. Okay, I'm going to show you an example and then I've got an exam question for you guys to have a go at. So we've got an example. It says a straight line has an equation 5 minus 3x. Write down the gradient of the line. Okay, so step one, we're going to get it into the correct format. Okay, so get it into the correct format. And the correct format is y equals mx plus c. That's the correct format that you want it to be in. Okay, so we want the thing with the x on the where it needs to be first. So y needs to be by itself, y is by itself. So it's going to be y equals, we're just going to switch these two things around. So it's going to become minus 3x plus 5. So it's in the correct format. And when you're switching it around, just remember that you move the sign, which is in front of the number as well, to the front, just so it's in the correct format. We've just switched them around, so it's in the form that we want it to be in. We need to have it so that mx is first, and then we've got the plus c after, the number at the end, and then we've got the thing which is the number which is in front of the x first. So we've got it into the correct format. Y equals minus 3x plus 5. Now, what is the gradient of the line? Remember, the gradient of the line is just the number which is in front of x. And the number which is in front of x is minus 3. So this is going to be our gradient. Okay, so our gradient is just going to be minus 3. And then it says write down the coordinates of the point where the line crosses the y-axis. So remember, it crosses the y-axis when it basically crosses the y-axis. The number at the end of the equation will tell you where it crosses the y-axis. That's the y-intercept. Okay, so if we have a look at this, we know that C is the y-intercept. Okay, so we just need to find C in this. So we have y equals minus 3x plus 5. So we know that the number, which is by itself, is going to be the y-intercept. So this over here is our y-intercept. That's the place that it crosses the y-axis. Okay, and it says write down the coordinates. Okay, so when it crosses the y-axis, if we go back, when it crosses the y-axis, in this example, for example, if we look at this line, the coordinates for the x are just going to be 0 because when it crosses the y-axis, it's not gone anything to the right or to the left. It's literally on the y-axis. It's bang on the y-axis. So the x coordinate is always going to be 0 when it crosses the y-axis. So if we wanted to work out the coordinates of the y-intercept in this case, it is just going to be 0, 1, because that's the coordinates of that point there. Okay, the y-intercept, when you've got the y-intercept, the x value is always going to be 0. In this example, we saw the y-intercept was 0.5. That's the place where it crosses the y-axis. When you cross the y-axis, the x value is 0 because the coordinates of that is 0, 0, 0.5. So your coordinates would be 0, 0.5. So in this example over here, it says write down the coordinates of the point where the line crosses the y-axis. We have the equation y equals minus 3x plus 5. We know that it crosses the y-axis at 5. So that means the x coordinate is going to be 0 because whenever something crosses the y-axis, the x coordinate, it's literally bang on the line. It's gone 0 right or 0 left. It's only gone up or down. So it's going to be 0, 5. That's the coordinates of the point where it crosses the y-axis. So your coordinates are going to be 0, 5. Okay? Does anyone have any questions from this example? I'm going to give you guys 1 or 2 examples to have a go at by yourself now. Okay? So this is your next question. So I have 2 questions for you guys to have a go at. This is your first question. I want you guys to have a go at working out the gradient of the line and the coordinates where the line crosses the y-axis. Okay, and type in your answer in the Q&A. I'll give you guys 1 minute. If you don't have access to the Q&A, you can scan the QR code, which is on the screen, and you can let me know through there. And guys, when you're working out part B, make sure you give me the coordinates, not just the y-intercept. Okay, so we're seeing some good answers both on the form and the Q&A. Okay. I'm going to go through it now. Okay, so well done everyone for answering in the Q&A and the form. So if we go through it now, so it says a straight line has equation y equals 3x minus 2. Write down the gradient of the line. So in terms of the gradient of the line, remember we want it to be in this format, y equals mx plus c. Is it in that format? Yes, it is, because we have y equals 3x minus 2. It is in that format. It says write down the gradient of the line. So m is the gradient. So the thing that's next to the x is 3. So our gradient is just going to be 3. Okay, and then it says write down the coordinates of the point where the line crosses the y-axis. So we know that it crosses the y-axis at c, and c is minus 2 in this case. So it crosses the y-axis at c. When it crosses the y-axis, you know that the x coordinate is going to be 0. Okay, because it's literally going to be bang on the y-axis. It's not going to go right or left. It's just going to go up or down. So the x coordinate is going to be 0. And then the y coordinate is just going to be what c is, the y-intercept. So it's going to be 0, minus 2. Okay, so well done for having a go at that question. Just one more question over here, and then we'll move on to a different style of question. Okay, again, I'm going to give you guys 1 minute. Type your answer into the Q&A or the form, and I'll go through the answers in 1 minute. Okay, so I'm seeing some good answers come in. Okay. So if we go through this question over here, first of all, let's get this into the correct format. So we need it in the format y equals mx plus c. We need it in that format. And it's not in that format. The x needs to come first, and we move it with the negative sign. Remember, we move it with the sign that's in front of it. So it's going to be y equals minus x plus 2. Okay, now over here, when there is no number, minus x, there's an invisible 1 over here. Okay, when there is no number before the letter, that means that there's an invisible 1. If I said to you just x plus 2, that actually means 1x plus 2. We just don't write the 1 over there because x counts as 1. Okay, so that whenever you don't have a number in front of a letter, there's an invisible 1 in front of it. So the gradient of this line is m, and m is minus 1, as you can see. So the gradient of this line would be minus 1. Then it says write down the coordinates of the point where the line crosses the y-axis. So it crosses the y-axis when y is 2, because c is the y-intercept and c is 2 over here. So the y-intercept we know is 2. Okay, and when the y-intercept is 2, we know that there's not going to be an x value because it's not going to go right or left. It's literally bang on the axis. So it's going to be 0, 2. Okay, the y-intercept, the y-coordinate is going to be 2. So your answer is 0, 2. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to a difference of an example where we have to write down the equation of a line. And again, there is a simple method that we can follow in order to answer a question like this. Okay, so we're going to go through this step by step, and then I'm going to give you guys a question to have a go at. The answer to the previous question was -1 and 0, 2. Okay, so -1, 0, 2. Okay, so it says a line passes through the point 0, 4. We know that the gradient of the line is 2. We need to write down the equation of this line. Okay, can you go back to the previous question? Here, this is the previous question. I'll just stay here for 10 seconds and then I'll move on. Okay, so hopefully you've got your answers down. Okay, so we know we need to write down the equation of this line. The equation of this line, we need to know the equation of any line is going to be y equals mx plus c. That's the equation of any line. So whenever you get a straight lines question, always write down y equals mx plus c. Okay, so we've got y equals mx plus c written down. Now what? We know that the gradient of the line is 2. And we know that in this equation, the gradient is m. Okay, so instead of m, we're going to replace it with a number because we know the number. Okay, we know that the gradient is 2. So we're just going to replace the m with a number. So it's going to be y equals 2x plus c. Okay, now we need to work out what c is. Okay, the y and the x are going to be there. It doesn't matter about the y and the x. We need to work out c. And the way that you do this, we know that c is the y-intercept. Okay, we know that c is the y-intercept. So how do we work out c? Where does it cross the y-axis? Well, this one is quite simple. It crosses the y-axis at 4. Okay, so it's just going to be y equals 2x plus 4. But sometimes what you will be given, you won't be given a coordinate as simple as that. So I'm going to show you a different way of doing it that will work in every case. So you know we've got these coordinates 0, 4. Okay, we know that this is the x1 and this is the y1. Okay, the first number is x, The second number is y. And we have this equation, y equals 2x plus c. Because we've worked out the gradient, well, we've been given the gradient, we've just substituted in the gradient. Now what we can do, can you see we have an x value, which is 0, and we have a y value, which is 4. And in here, just a minute, okay. In here, we also have a y value, and we also have an x value. So all we're going to do is we're going to substitute in the x value from these coordinates and the y value from those coordinates into the equation. So the y value is 4 and the x value is 0. So 2, 0. Okay, and then we've got the plus c. Now we can rearrange this to work out what c is. Okay, so 2 times 0 is 0. So we have 0 plus c equals 4. And then c would just be equal to 4, as you can see. Because 0 plus c is just c. C will just be equal to 4. Now we know that c is equal to 4. We can substitute c back into the original equation here. So we know that our final equation is going to be y equals 2x plus 4. Okay, so just to reiterate why we did that, the reason why we did that was because that this will work for any coordinates. This was just a simple coordinate 0, 4. That's why you were able to plug in plus 4 at the end. But the way that you would do this with any coordinate is this way over here. Okay, so first of all, work out the gradient. If you don't know the gradient, work it out. You will be given two coordinates. Substitute in the gradient like we have over here, y equals 2x plus c. And then what you're going to do is you are going to use the coordinates that they've given you, which is 0, 4. That's the coordinates that they have given you. And you're going to substitute it in place of x and y. So we had 2x plus c. We've substituted the coordinates x and y into the equation, so 0, 4 into this equation, and we've worked out what c is. Okay, we've rearranged to work out what c is, and we've got that c equals 4. So in the equation that we had originally over here, 2x plus c, we know what c is. We know that c is 4. So we can just put in y equals 2x plus 4. Okay, and that would be our final answer. That's the equation of the line. Okay, so question for you guys to have a go at. Very similar question. I'm going to give you guys 1 minute, and I want you to type your answer into the Q&A or into the form. If you have any questions, you can let me know as well. Okay. I've seen a lot of good answers come in, so well done, everybody. I'm going to go through the answers now. Okay, so we have a line that passes through the points 0, -5. The gradient of the line is 3. Write down the equation of this line. So we know that the equation of a straight line is going to be y equals mx plus c. That's the equation of a straight line. We know that the gradient is 3. We've been given the gradient. Okay, sometimes you have to work it out, but we've been given the gradient in this case. So we know that m is the gradient So we're going to have y equals 3x plus c. Okay, and then you can notice straight away that this is x is 0, so that means -5 is the y-intercept, and you can literally just put them together to get y equals 3x minus 5. That's one way of doing it. I'm also going to do it the other way, just in case, because this is a nice coordinate as well. When the next lesson, we're going to be looking at harder coordinates, so it will be a bit more difficult in terms of next lesson. So I'm covering it now as well. So over here, we know that it's y equals 3x plus c. That's what we have. And we've also been given these coordinates, 0, -5. We know that 0 is x and y is -5. So we're just going to substitute in x equals 0 and y equals -5 into the equation. So y is -5, x is 0, and then we need to work out c. -3 times 0 is 0, and then we have -5, and then we have plus c. So that means c is just equal to -5. Okay, so we have c just equal to -5. So now we know what c is. We can substitute it back into this original equation of y equals 3x plus c. So it's just going to be y equals 3x minus 5. Okay, now I saw an answer that said y equals 3x plus -5. When you have a plus and minus together, that just means minus. Okay, so if you had y equals 3x plus -5, plus and minus together will just mean minus. Y equals 3x minus 5. Okay, so either way, the answer is y equals 3x minus 5. Okay, so now, what if we needed to work out the equation of a line from a graph? Okay, you're given a graph and it says work out the equation of a line. Okay, the way that you would do this is step 1, work out the gradient. So you're going to work out the gradient. That's step 1. Okay, so how do you work out the gradient? You're going to pick out 2 points. 2 points on the graph that you can clearly see. Okay, so I can definitely tell that this one is 1, 3. And I need to pick out another point. I can definitely tell that this one is 2, 1. So I'm going to pick out those 2 points. Okay, so what are those 2 points? Those points are 1, 3, and 2, 1. Those are the 2 coordinates that I've picked out. And I'm going to work out the gradient now. So I'm going to label this as 1, and I'm going to label this as 2. This is the x coordinate, this is the y coordinate, this is the x coordinate, this is the y coordinate. Okay, and all you're going to do is 2 subtract 1. That's all you're going to do. So the gradient is just the change in y divided by the change in x. Okay, so the change in y, we're going to do 2 subtract 1, so it's going to be 1 subtract 3. And then the change in x, we're doing 2 subtract 1, so it's going to be 2 subtract 1. Okay, so 1 minus 3 is going to be minus 2. And then 2 subtract 1 is just 1. Minus 2 divided by 1 gives you minus 2. Okay, so your gradient is minus 2. So we've worked out the gradient. Now, we have our equation of a line. Okay, and the equation of a line is y equals mx plus c. We have just worked out the gradient. The gradient is minus 2. As you can see there, the gradient is just minus 2. So instead of writing m, we can write down minus 2. Okay, so we're going to have y equals minus 2 x plus c. We've just replaced the m with the gradient that we have just found. And we just need to work out c now. C is just the y-intercept. Okay, it's the place that it crosses the y-axis. So where does it cross the y-axis? It crosses the y-axis here. It crosses the y-axis at 5. So that means it's going to be y equals minus 2x plus 5. That's the equation of the line. So just to reiterate over here, how did we do this? Step 1, if you're not given the gradient, always work out the gradient. So from this graph, you need to pick out 2 coordinates that you can work out the gradient from. So I picked out 2 coordinates and I worked out the gradient. So the gradient was minus 2 that I worked out. Then what you do is you get your equation of the line. You know that equation of the line is going to be y equals mx plus c. You've worked out the gradient, so substitute in the gradient in place of m. Once you've substituted in the gradient in place of m, then you can work out your y-intercept, okay? By looking at the graph, you can see where it crosses the y-axis, where it touches the y-axis, and that number will be your c, okay? And then if you combine that together, you will get your equation of a line, y equals minus 2x plus 5, okay? So I've got a question for you guys to have a go over here. So this time it's picked out the coordinates that it wants you to work out the gradient for. I want you guys to work out the equation of this line. Okay, and type your answer in the Q&A. I'll give you guys a minute or two. You can type in your answer in the Q&A or in the form, which the QR code is on the screen for. Okay, I'm going to go through the answers now. Okay, so step 1, when you're asked to work out the equation of a line, is going to be work out the gradient. Okay, so step 1 is work out the gradient. Okay, so we're going to work out the gradient of the line. So we're given 2 coordinates over here. The gradient, so we're given 2 coordinates. Coordinate A is 0, 3. That's the first coordinate. And the second coordinate is 2, 7. Those are our 2 coordinates. Okay, so we're going to label them x, y, and this is coordinate 1 and coordinate 2. And all we're going to do is 2 subtract 1 to work out the gradient. So we know that the gradient is the change in y divided by the change in x. The change in y, so we're going to do 2 subtract 1. So we're going to do 7 subtract 3. So 7 subtract 3 divided by the change in x. We're going to do 2 subtract 1. So we're going to do 2 subtract 0. So 2 subtract 0. So 7 subtract 3 is 4. And 2 subtract 0 is 2. And then 4 divided by 2 is just 2. So the gradient is going to be 2. Okay, so we worked out the gradient. The second step is going to be the equation of the line. Equation of the line, we know, is going to be y equals mx plus c. That's the equation of the line. We've just worked out the gradient over here. The gradient is 2. Okay, so it's going to be y equals 2x plus c. Okay, because we've just worked out the gradient. And then where does it cross the y-axis? Where's the y-intercept? We can see that it crosses the y-axis at 3. So our answer is going to be y equals 2x plus 3. Okay, so that's your equation of the line.